Why does the NOD-KRAI party screen have the Hun Moon?
Hey everyone, it's Sevy and welcome back to another CE server video for Genshin version Luna 1 NOD-KRAI. Quick disclaimer that this being from the CE server, there may still be some changes, but this is a preview, this is early access, and yeah, let's get into it. In this video, I'm just going to be going over some of the new equipment in the version. And we're going to start with the artifacts and then move on to the NOD-KRAI free-to-play weapons, and then right after that I'll just talk quickly about Lauma's signature weapon. By the way guys, I also have a redemption code in the description and in the pinned comment. Make sure to redeem it for 60 primos. So starting with the artifacts, we have two new artifact sets coming into NOD-KRAI. The first is the Silken Moon's Serenade set, and this essentially on the two-piece it gives 20% energy recharge, so that gives us another 5-star artifact set that has ER on the two-piece. And then the 4-piece, it basically, when the user deals elemental damage, it gives a party-wide EM buff. 60 EM for teams with only one NOD-KRAI character on them, and 120 EM for teams with 2 or more NOD-KRAI characters on them. And obviously when you put this on Lauma, it makes her further buff her bloom teams. It's going to be good for when you have a Nilou bloom team where almost everyone at different times is probably proccing bloom reactions, and everyone benefits from having a little extra EM, even though Nilou is buffing those bountiful cores with her HP and Lauma is of course buffing the blooms with her own kit. But the little extra EM does help. It's also good for hyper bloom teams and of course bloom plus other teams where the extra EM on whoever your dedicated trigger is going to be useful for hyper bloom or burgeon damage. This kind of adds to the sets that you could put on your team when you have bloom centric or bloom plus centric teams, similar to how when you have a bloom plus centric team, you want at least one user holding the Deepwood memory set to lower enemies' danger resistance. So this is kind of just like, yeah, this is a good support set for those reaction teams. Not necessarily just bloom. You can put this on support characters that are buffing like melt DPSs or vape DPSs because that extra EM will help as well. But right from the get-go, you can tell it's like oriented for Lauma to use on her kit. And then it said that this effect can be triggered from off-field as long as the holder is dealing elemental damage. And for Lauma, that's very easy to do because her skill deals periodic elemental damage even when she's off-field. In addition, it says all party members' lunar reaction damage is increased by 10% for each different gleaming moon effect that party members have. This might sound weird when you're looking at this artifact set description alone, but as you'll see later, the other artifact set also has a different gleaming moon effect, so we'll come back to that in a short while. Now moving on to the other artifact set, and this obviously looks very Flynn's coded. This is the Night of the Skies Unveiling. The two-piece is plus 80 elemental mastery, and that just adds to the other many sets that already have plus 80 elemental mastery if ever you need it. But the 4-piece, it basically gives the holder crit rate when they trigger lunar reactions, and even more crit rate if the party has 2 or more NOD-KRAI characters. We can revisit that bit about the Gleaming Moon effects. If you look at the Silken Moon Serenade, it's called Gleaming Moon Devotion. If you look at this set, it's called Gleaming Moon Intent. So if you have Gleaming Moon Devotion and you have Gleaming Moon Intent on the team, or holders of those different sets on the team, that's 2 different Gleaming Moon effects, and each of those different Gleaming Moon effects are going to give plus 10% lunar reaction damage. If you have both, then that's going to be plus 20% lunar reaction damage. It does say at the end that effects from Gleaming Moon cannot stack. It just means that Gleaming Moon effects from the same Gleaming Moon cannot stack. So if you have 2 holders of Silken Moon Serenade, then the party isn't going to get double the effect. But you can still get the effects of Silken Moon Serenade, like the extra EM, and the Night of the Skies Unveiling effect with the extra crit rate in the same party. Let's move on to the NOD-KRAI free-to-play craftable weapons. I have them in the CE server at R5, so at R1 you can expect the quantities to be halved. We're going to start with the Catalyst. It has a low base attack and then a high substat of Elemental Mastery. And on R5 it says bloom damage is increased by 96%, so at R1 you can expect that to be 48%. And lunar bloom damage is increased by 24%, or 12% at R1. And then if you have 2 or more NOD-KRAI characters, lunar bloom damage is increased by an additional 24%. This, first of all, can just serve as a 4-star EM stat stick, but it obviously is geared to benefit Lauma. However, unlike the artifact set, passive of this weapon only applies to the user. It's not a party-wide buff. So essentially, only Lauma's bloom damage is going to be increased. Only her lunar bloom damage is going to be increased. Thankfully, Lauma does have lunar bloom damage in her kit. If you're thinking of who else this can be used on, I guess if you have a Hydro user procking blooms like Kokomi, then she can hold this as like an EM stat stick and to increase the bloom damage that she is procking or triggering. And then essentially, like I said before, it can also just be used as an EM stick for other EM desiring characters, but then again, there are already other 4-star weapons that might have better fitting passives for them anyway, such as Sacrificial Fragments. And then moving on, we have the Claymore. It's called Master Key, and it also has a low base attack and then a high ER substat. Passive says, upon causing an elemental reaction, increases elemental mastery by 120 for 12 seconds or 60 at R1. And again, this only applies to the holder. It's not saying like all nearby party members or anything like that. And then when you have 2+ NOD-KRAI characters, then that effect is essentially doubled, and the effect can be triggered even if the equipping character is off field. So looking at this, it's a big ER stat weapon, and then it has the same ER stat as Favonius, but of course Favj has the extra particles. So if your character really is energy hungry, then I would still recommend Favj just over anything else. But looking at this, it is applicable to Aino. We can expect that the starting weapons are going to be fitting for the starting characters. So it's going to be a good weapon for Aino. I haven't done a video on Aino yet. And Aino does have some EM scaling in her kit. So that passive does help. But also Aino is burst centric, so having a whole chunk of ER is going to help her get her burst up consistently. When I was trying to think of who else I might put this on, the ones that came to mind were like Dory, if you're trying to use her in a hyper bloom team, Kaveh as a bloom damage dealer that also is burst centric, so he does need a chunk of ER a lot of the time. Another one is Sayu, I suppose, who also does want to use her burst reliably. And then that extra EM, especially if she's C6, then the extra EM at least helps. But of course, if we have NOD-KRAI character, it's usually more tailored to them. I wonder what other Claymore NOD-KRAI characters we're going to get. That makes me also wonder if Varka is going to be counted as a NOD-KRAI character, or if he's going to be like Mondstadt character. I don't know if he'll be able to proc the moon sign stuff. But anyway, moving on, we have the pole arm. It's called the Prospector's Shovel. Its substat is attack percent. Like we're following the theme of the starting weapons fitting the starting characters, I'm going to assume that this is going to be a good free-to-play weapon for Flints. Now on R5, its passive says electrocharge damage is increased by 96%, 48% in R1, probably. And lunar charge damage is increased by 24%. And then when you have 2+ NOD-KRAI characters on the team, lunar charge damage is increased by additional 24%. Essentially, it buffs the user's electrocharged and lunar charge damage, plus more with 2+ NOD-KRAI characters on it. Obviously, probably going to be a free-to-play weapon for Flints. I think it can be used as a free-to-play weapon for Inefa as well. Now, there's not a lot of characters that you play specifically for electrocharged. It's probably going to be more of a lunar charge deal with Inefa and Flynn's and whatever future characters come out with that playstyle. But looking at other polearm characters that you might play in a taser team, a lot of them really still rely on their raw damage anyway and would prefer like crit stats, you know? It's good that this weapon does have attack percent, but if you're playing Sino in a taser team, for example, then you probably already have a crit weapon for him, and that's already great. Next, we have Snare Hook, which is the bow, and it's pretty much the same as the Claymore. It has a chunky ER passive and a low base attack. And then at R5, it also increases the elemental mastery of the user. It is one of the few free-to-play bows that have this chonky of an ER stat, with the other one being Favonius, so you can use this as an ER stick, again, for energy-hungry characters. It's just missing the extra particles that Fav has. ER-hungry characters that can also benefit from the EM passive can be potential candidates for this, but I don't think it's super great for anyone in particular yet. We're probably waiting for a future NOD-KRAI character that this can be more applicable to. Non-NOD-KRAI characters that come to mind would be Auroran. I know that a lot of people build Auroran with Fav just to make sure that he gets his burst up, and the extra EM on Auroran could benefit him. There's also Venti where the extra EM is just like extra swirl damage or something like that. Again, I don't think it's like super great for anyone else right now, and it's probably just built for NOD-KRAI characters. Last one is an interesting one. It's Serenity's Call, and it does have an ER substat, but its passive increases max HP. And I think this is going to be like Nilou's best free-to-play weapon, because right now the HP buffing weapons that are available are of course Key, which is her signature. There's Splendor, which has some HP in its passive. There's Jade Cutter, which has some HP in its passive. And there's also Dockhand's Assistant, which has an HP substat, but Dockhand's Assistant is purely a gacha weapon. It's not something you can craft, and it's not free to play. At R3, this Serenity's Call already gives more HP than an R1 Jade Cutter. If you don't have Nilou's Key of Kajinu's suit, or if you don't have Dockhand's Assistant, then you could start with this weapon on Nilou. It's going to be a good fit that you could refine over time until you get that 32%. Now, what's tough about this is if you put this sword on Nilou, chances are you're only going to get the first part of the passive. You're not going to get the second. If you're playing a Nilou Lauma team, then you want Lauma to be the only NOD-KRAI character on the team. And if you want a fuller explanation of why that is so, you can check out my Lauma pre-release video, because I explained the whole bit there. But TLDR, you're going to want Lauma to be the only NOD-KRAI character on the team, which means you're not getting the Ascendant Gleam effect, which means you're not going to be getting that extra 32% max HP. That's a bit of a tough part. Now, in the chance that you do put 2 NOD-KRAI characters on the team with Lauma, and your blooms are no longer critting, then I mean, at least she gets the extra 32% max HP, right? But again, it's kind of like a weird trade-off that you're getting there. The other sword character that comes to mind that can benefit from the extra max HP increase is Furina. But unlike Nilou, Furina also appreciates crit stats. So this might not be the best sword out there for her. However, if you do need a free-to-play sword that gives ER and extra HP to help Furina generate her burst and give that extra HP scaling, then there's this sword available now, at least. Okay, so Lauma's signature weapon it has a very long description, but the TLDR of it is when the holder's skill deals hydro or dendro damage, and it's crazy how specific of a condition that is, then the equipped character will get 60 EM at R1. Then, if a nearby party member triggers Lunar Bloom reactions, which when Lauma's on the party, they will be doing that, any party member will be doing that, then the equipping character gets another 60 EM. And then, if both of those effects are in play, then all nearby party members' bloom damage, hyper bloom damage, burgeon damage, and lunar bloom damage are going to be increased. And then the aforementioned effects can be triggered even if the equipping character is off field. It has a low base attack and a high EM stat. So, you know, of course, tailor fit for Lauma. It's a gorgeous weapon, and actually when I was leveling it up at the start, the moon wasn't visible in the center of it. Like, the details on this are really, really pretty. This is going to be a great weapon on Lauma. I'm not going to give you any calcs, but typically what happens with 5-star characters and their signature weapons are usually like 20 to 30% better than like their baseline free-to-play options. So just keep that in mind. If you are pulling Lauma and you want to bling her out, then that weapon is a beautiful one. But I tried Lauma on the free-to-play NOD-KRAI Catalyst at R5, and it's in my Lauma showcase, and she performed very well already. I guess the other people that you could put this on, if you're really going for the bloom party, then one of them would be Kokomi, if you're playing her as like a bloom trigger, if you want to like full EM Kokomi and then she's, you know, generating a lot of blooms and stuff. You could also put it on Nahida, since her elemental skill deals dendro damage, and she'll probably be able to get the effects pretty easily. Anyway, that's going to be it for this NOD-KRAI equipment video. If anything, I hope you at least enjoyed the preview or the early look at the weapons that are going to be available. I guess if you put Lauma on like the free-to-play Catalyst, just be prepared for her to not be as drippy as you want her to be. Let me know in the comments what you think of these weapons. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you in NOD-KRAI. You can check out my other pre-release NOD-KRAI videos in the playlist probably, or linked down in the description. I'll see you soon. Take care.